One of the most common questions that caregivers ask after placing a loved one in a nursing home: what if I made the wrong decision? The emotion most caregivers feel after placing a loved one in a nursing home is not relief, it's fear. The kind that people don't talk about publicly. It's the quiet fear that shows up later when the house is empty and it's quiet. The paperwork's been signed. When you finally sit down and the question just doesn't stop coming. What if I did the wrong thing? As a hospice nurse, I hear this quite often. They're not second guessing their decision because they didn't think it through carefully. They're second guessing themselves because every option they had was painful. And it's often assumed that the hardest part of that process is making the decision, but it's not. For many people, the hardest part comes after. Once the decision has been made, then your mind starts replaying everything. You're kept awake at night with the questions. What if the care is not good enough? What if they don't like it? What if they fall? What if, what if, what if? What if something happens to them and it's my fault? Caregivers don't ask themselves this because they're careless. They ask themselves these questions because they understand the weight of the responsibility. Once this decision is made, there's no reset button. This decision often feels unbearable because you're being asked to choose under impossible conditions. Caregivers are exhausted. They're grieving. You're under pressure about safety concerns, finances, times, and very often family members that have their own opinions. You're being asked to take responsibility for outcomes that you can't control, and there is no neutral option. Sometimes caregivers just don't make a decision because they don't know what to do. But not making a decision is making a decision. It is deciding to allow your loved one to remain in the environment that they're currently in. And at times, that can increase the risks to both your loved one and the caregiver. Placement will bring guilt, fear, worry about the quality of care. Safety and sorrow often arrive together. And this isn't indecision, it's emotional overload. When every option, every choice is going to cost you something, your brain doesn't move towards clarity. It freezes. It replays and it searches for a certainty that is just not possible. Most caregiving decisions are not between right and wrong. They're between hard and harder. Caregivers often want someone to tell them what's the right choice. And the truth is, there usually isn't one. There are just different risks, different losses, different consequences. Wanting certainty is human. Wanting to know that you chose correctly is human. But not finding a clear answer to that doesn't mean that you failed. Sometimes the situation itself just doesn't offer a painless path forward. Most caregivers are not afraid of making a mistake. They're afraid of living with the consequences. They're afraid that if something goes wrong, they'll blame themselves forever. That they'll replay the decision in their mind. They'll hear the words, well, you should have, even if no one says them. They're afraid of being held responsible for their loved one's decline, for their perceived suffering, for how the story ends. This fear doesn't come from a lack of love. It comes from carrying the responsibility for someone that you care deeply about. Here is the difficult truth from hospice care. Even loving, thoughtful decisions do not guarantee a positive outcome. Disease progresses. Complications happen. Decline continues. Caregivers often judge their decisions based on information that they obtain later. But that's not fair. That's hindsight. At the moment you made the decision to place your loved one in a facility, you were very likely working with limited sleep, limited time, and limited capacity. You made the best decision you could with the information that you had at that time. No caregiving decision removes risk. Waiting often increases the danger to your loved one. And placement carries different risks. There is no option that eliminates uncertainty. For caregivers of faith, there is something important to remember. God does not expect you to know the future. Scripture never requires omniscience. Wisdom is not perfect prediction. Wisdom is acting faithfully with what you know right now. You are not meant to choose with perfect clarity. You are meant to make this decision with love, prayer, and human limits. Peace sometimes comes not from knowing that you chose perfectly, but for knowing that God was there with you in the choosing. The real burden that caregivers carry is not fear of choosing wrong. It's being the one who had to choose it all. Most caregivers would gladly accept the exhaustion and sacrifice if it meant not carrying responsibility for outcomes that they can't control. If you're carrying regret or second guessing yourself, it doesn't mean you failed. It means you cared deeply in a situation that offered no painless way forward.